Princess Thalira stood at the balcony of the royal palace on Zyxar, her home planet, gazing out into the endless expanse of the cosmos. The stars were as bright as they had always been, yet today they seemed distant, as if hiding secrets she was yet to uncover. She had always been fascinated by the stars, but it wasn't just their beauty that held her attention today. It was a memory from her childhood, one that had been haunting her for years, a memory of a human. She closed her eyes, trying to recall the details. She remembered being small, no more than a child, standing in the middle of a battlefield. Her home, the royal palace, had been under attack by an unknown enemy, and chaos had erupted in every corner of the kingdom. She had been lost, frightened, and alone. But then there was a figure, a human, someone who had saved her life. She could still hear the faint echo of his voice, a promise of protection. She had never learned his name, nor had she ever seen his face clearly, but she had always known that he had been there for her when she needed him most. The image of the man was vague, but the feeling of safety he had given her was strong, so strong that it had remained with her all these years. She had often wondered who he was, where he came from, and why he had helped her when no one else could. But no matter how much she searched, no answers had come. Thalira's life had moved forward. She had grown into a capable leader, a fierce warrior, and a protector of her people. She had been trained in the arts of combat, diplomacy, and strategy. Yet the memory of the human remained. It was as if a part of her was missing, a piece of her past that she could never quite grasp. One day, while going through the royal archives in search of old documents about the history of Zyxar's royal family, Thalira stumbled upon a peculiar relic. It was a simple device, shaped like a small, round stone, but it hummed with energy. Intrigued, she activated it, and a holographic image flickered to life in front of her. The image was of her parents, the king and queen of Zyxar. Their faces were filled with concern, as if they were trying to communicate a secret message. The image was old, but Thalira could sense the urgency in their expressions. The message was brief. It spoke of a human, a warrior from Earth, who had once saved her life during a raid on the royal palace. Her parents had hidden this information from her, knowing that it was a part of her past that would be difficult to understand. But it wasn't just the message that left Thalira stunned. It was the mention of Earth. A human from Earth had saved her life, and now it seemed that the story was tied to her very existence. Earth was a world that had been forgotten by most of the galaxy, a planet lost to time and space. There was little known about it, and its people were nothing but myths to the advanced civilizations of the universe. Yet here was a message, a relic, and a part of her past that had been concealed for so long. Thalira felt a wave of determination rise within her. She had to know more. She had to find this human, this warrior who had been there for her when no one else had. The question of why she had been saved, of why he had chosen her, burned in her mind. She could not rest until she had answers. With a firm resolve, Thalira summoned her trusted advisor, Zelka, to the royal chambers. Zelka had been by her side since childhood, and though she was not of royal blood, her loyalty and wisdom were unmatched. Together they had fought many battles, both on the battlefield and in the court. But this was different. This was personal. "My princess," Zelka greeted her, bowing slightly as she entered the room. "What troubles you?" Thalira's gaze shifted to the hologram, still hovering in the air. She didn't need to explain, for Zelka had already seen the message. Her eyes narrowed, a sign that she understood the gravity of the situation. "You've seen the message," Thalira said. "It's about the human who saved me. I need to find him." Zelka hesitated for a moment. "Your Highness, Earth is lost. Its coordinates were erased from all records centuries ago. There's no way to find a human from that planet." "I don't care," Thalira replied firmly. "I need to know who he is. I need to know why he saved me." Zelka nodded, understanding the princess's determination. "I will gather the best scouts and explorers in the kingdom. We'll find a way. If Earth is out there, we will find it." With the decision made, Thalira and Zelka set out on a journey that would take them to the farthest reaches of the galaxy. They traveled from planet to planet, searching for any clue that could lead them to Earth. Each world they visited provided new challenges, but nothing that could answer the princess's question. For months, they scoured the galaxy, but each time they hit a dead end. As they ventured deeper into the unknown, Thalira began to feel the weight of her quest. The journey was not only about finding the human who had saved her, but also about uncovering the truth about her past. Who was she really? Was there something more to her connection with Earth than just a simple rescue? The questions plagued her thoughts, but she refused to give up. One day, as they were traveling through the dense asteroid field of the Kalar sector, they received an unexpected signal. It was faint but unmistakable, a distress signal. The signal was ancient, originating from a human ship that had been lost in space many years ago. Thalira and Zelka immediately set course for the source of the signal, hoping that it would lead them to the answers they sought. As they approached the coordinates, they saw something that took their breath away. A massive ship, older and worn, drifted in the darkness of space. The ship's markings identified it as a vessel from Earth, lost to the galaxy long ago. Thalira's heart raced. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. This was the ship that had once carried the human warrior who had saved her. But where were the survivors? Who had sent the distress signal? They docked with the ship, carefully making their way through the dark, empty corridors. The ship had clearly been abandoned, its systems damaged, and its crew nowhere to be found. But in one of the ship's lower decks, they found someone. A single survivor, barely alive, lying in a cryogenic chamber. It was a man, older than the boy she remembered, but unmistakably the same. His face, though weathered and scarred by time, was the same face she had seen in her dreams. The human warrior, the one who had saved her life so many years ago, was here. Her heart skipped a beat as she knelt beside him, calling out to him softly. The man stirred, his eyes flickering open. He looked up at Thalira, confusion in his gaze as if he didn't recognize her. But Thalira knew. This was the moment she had been waiting for. "Who are you?" the man asked, his voice rough yet familiar. Thalira's voice trembled as she spoke. "I am Princess Thalira of Zyxar. You saved me when I was a child." The man's eyes widened in shock. For a moment he seemed to be processing the information, trying to piece together the fragments of a memory long buried. "Thalira, I saved you," he whispered. "I thought I had forgotten you." Tears welled up in Thalira's eyes as she nodded. "You never left my heart. And now I've found you." The human's name was Riker, and his journey to find her, to understand the connection between them, was just beginning. As the days passed aboard the drifting human ship, Thalira couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of awe that filled her every time she looked at Riker. The human warrior who had saved her life years ago, the one who had once been a stranger, now lay before her, fragile yet alive. His presence was both comforting and mysterious. Every moment they shared seemed to bring her closer to understanding not just him, but herself. Riker's eyes, though clouded with confusion and age, still held a spark, a fire that Thalira recognized instantly. It was the same fire that had burned in the young man who had stood before her on that battlefield, a warrior fighting against overwhelming odds to protect a child he had never known. The memory felt distant, but seeing him now, Thalira knew that their paths were destined to cross again. This time, she would not let him slip away. Days turned into weeks as Thalira and Zelka worked tirelessly to revive the ship's systems and bring it back to life. The ship, though old and broken, still held the echoes of its former glory. Riker, too, slowly regained his strength. His body had been in cryogenic stasis for far longer than it was intended, and his muscles had atrophied, but the warrior spirit in him was unyielding. It wasn't long before he began to assist with the repairs, though his actions were slow and deliberate, as if he was still adjusting to the world around him. The more Thalira observed him, the more questions began to form in her mind. Who was Riker really? How had he ended up in cryostasis? What had happened to the rest of his crew? And why had he been sent to Zyxar in the first place? It seemed there was so much more to his story than he had shared. One evening, after a long day of repairs, Thalira sat with Riker in the ship's observation deck. The stars outside shimmered in the distance, and the quiet hum of the ship's engines filled the silence between them. Thalira, ever the princess and the leader, had grown used to the weight of her responsibilities. But now, in this moment, it was as if the weight had shifted. She no longer felt the isolation that had plagued her before. There was something comforting in the company of Riker, despite the mysteries that surrounded him. "Tell me about Earth," Thalira said, her voice breaking the silence. "What is it like?" Riker hesitated for a moment, his gaze focused on the stars outside. "Earth is a simple place. Our people were never as advanced as Zyxar or other civilizations. We were just beginning to explore the stars when disaster struck. Our planet was ravaged by wars, disease, and environmental collapse. I was part of a group sent to explore new worlds to find a place for humanity to survive. Thalira listened intently, her eyes fixed on him. And how did you end up here on Zyxar? It wasn't planned, Riker continued. We were sent on a deep space mission to map out unexplored sectors. My crew was supposed to return to Earth, but we never made it. The ship was damaged, and we were forced to abandon our mission. I don't remember much after that. We were stranded in deep space, and one by one the others, they didn't make it. I don't even know how I survived. Thalira felt a pang of sorrow in her chest as she listened to his story. Riker had been alone, isolated in a vast and unforgiving universe. His courage, his resolve had kept him alive, but at what cost? He had lost everything, his crew, his home, his people, and yet he had saved her, a child in need of help. And Zyxar? Thalira asked, trying to understand the connection. How did you find us? Riker's expression softened, as if the question brought back memories he had long buried. I don't know why I ended up on Zyxar. It wasn't intentional. The ship's sensors malfunctioned, and I ended up here by accident. But when I saw you, when I heard you scream, I knew I couldn't leave. I didn't even know who you were, but something inside me told me I had to protect you. And I did. I don't know why, but it felt right. Thalira's heart fluttered. It was the same feeling she had always carried with her. The feeling of safety, of being watched over by someone who cared. It was as if their paths had crossed for a reason, though neither of them could fully comprehend it yet. You saved me, Thalira said softly, her voice filled with gratitude. You gave me hope when I had none. Riker looked at her, his expression unreadable. I didn't save you because I thought you'd be some great princess one day. I saved you because you were a child. And children need protection. No one should ever have to face the world alone. His words struck Thalira deeply. She had always carried the weight of her title, the expectations of her people. But in this moment, sitting next to Riker, she realized that the true strength of her leadership came from her humanity, her ability to care for those she led. It wasn't her royal blood or her strength in battle that made her a leader. It was her heart. The following days brought new challenges. The Zyxarian royal fleet, led by Commander Zerk, arrived to check on the situation. Thalira had sent a signal to the fleet weeks ago, and though she had hoped to keep the discovery of Riker a secret, she knew that her people would soon want answers. She had made the decision to be transparent. If Riker was to be part of her world, her people needed to understand who he was and why he had been saved. The meeting between Thalira and Zerk was tense. The commander was a loyal servant to the crown, but he was also wary of anything that could threaten the stability of Zyxar. Riker, being human and a stranger, represented an unknown force. Thalira understood Zerk's concerns, but she also knew that she could not let fear dictate their actions. She had to trust in her instincts. I've seen the human, Zerk said, his voice stern. You want to keep him here, Thalira, but what if he is a threat? What if the humans bring their war with them? Thalira stood tall, her gaze unwavering. Riker is not a threat. He saved my life when I was a child. He is not a warrior of conquest, but a survivor. He has no allegiance to anyone but himself. Zerk's eyes narrowed. But he is a human, and we know what humans are capable of. I know what you're afraid of, Thalira said calmly, but we cannot judge him based on the actions of others. Riker deserves a chance. I trust him. Zerk remained silent for a moment, then nodded reluctantly. Very well, but if anything goes wrong, you will be held responsible. Thalira's heart beat faster as Zerk left the room. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. She knew that her decision to trust Riker would not be without consequences. But she also knew that she could not turn her back on him. He had saved her once, and now it was her turn to protect him. As the days turned into weeks, Riker and Thalira grew closer. They shared stories of their worlds, their lives, their struggles. Thalira learned about the harsh realities of Riker's past, the loss of his crew and the battles he had fought. In return, she shared the history of Zyxar, the challenges her people faced, and the burdens of leadership. They had both suffered loss, but in each other they found understanding. Riker began to regain his strength. His muscles slowly healed, and his once weary body became more agile. He spent his days training with Zyxarian warriors, learning the ways of their combat techniques, while Thalira continued to guide him. She taught him about her world, about the intricacies of Zyxarian culture, and the honor that came with being part of her royal family. Though their worlds were so different, they found common ground in their shared experiences. One evening, as they stood together on the ship's observation deck once again, watching the stars, Thalira spoke quietly, almost to herself. I don't know what the future holds. But I know one thing, I'm glad you're here, Riker. Riker turned to face her, his eyes soft. I'm glad I'm here too. I never expected to find you again, but now that I have, I don't want to let you go. For the first time in years, Thalira felt a sense of peace. She didn't know what would come next, but with Riker by her side, she felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The journey to uncover the secrets of her past had only just begun. The days in the Zyxarian fleet passed by swiftly, yet each day brought more uncertainty. Thalira had made her choice to trust Riker, and so far it seemed like the right one. The Zyxarian people, although skeptical at first, were beginning to accept the human as part of their world. Riker, with his quiet determination and growing bond with the princess, proved himself worthy of their trust. Yet, as the peace settled, an ominous shadow loomed over Zyxar. Word came that the Vraxan Legion, an infamous warlike empire known for its conquest of peaceful worlds, was advancing towards Zyxar. Commander Zerk, who had been cautious about Riker, now had a new threat to focus on, and it was one that united everyone. The Vraxans had their eyes on Zyxar, a planet rich in resources and ancient technology, a prize they would not let go easily. Thalira, though troubled by the news, knew that the safety of her people came first. Riker, despite his quiet nature, had proven to be a valuable asset in her efforts to prepare for war. He had fought in countless battles and knew strategy better than most of the Zyxarian generals. While his people had no formal alliance with the Zyxarians, Riker's experience was invaluable, and Thalira knew she had to utilize it. Riker, Thalira said one morning, standing beside him as they observed the fleet's movements from the command deck. The stars outside glimmered with the promise of both danger and opportunity. I know you've fought in wars before. I need your help. Riker looked at her, his expression unreadable. His time on Zyxar had changed him. The anger and sorrow he had carried with him for so long had begun to fade, replaced with a sense of purpose. What do you need? I need you to help me train my warriors, Thalira said. The Vraxans are coming, and I won't let my people be slaughtered. Riker nodded, understanding the weight of her request. He had seen the devastation caused by the Vraxans in the past. They were brutal, efficient, and merciless. He knew what it was like to fight for survival, and he would help Thalira. I'll do what I can. The weeks that followed were filled with intense preparation. Riker worked alongside Thalira and the Zyxarian generals, teaching them new combat strategies and training their soldiers. The Zyxarian army, already skilled in combat, began to grow more disciplined, more organized. Riker's tactical expertise, gained from his experiences on Earth and in deep space, proved invaluable. The Zyxarians were quick learners, and with his guidance they honed their skills. As the days passed, Riker found himself growing more connected to Thalira. They had spent so much time together, training the soldiers, strategizing, and talking about their pasts. It was clear that there was a bond between them, a deep connection that went beyond their shared history. Riker, once closed off and hardened by years of loss, had begun to open up to her. And Thalira, a princess burdened by the weight of her kingdom's future, found solace in his presence. Late one evening, after a long day of training, Thalira and Riker found themselves alone in the command center. The rest of the crew had retired for the night, leaving them in the quiet stillness of the ship. I didn't expect things to turn out this way, Riker said, his voice low. I thought I was just going to die out here in space, lost and forgotten, but somehow here I am helping you fight for your people. Thalira turned to him, her expression soft. You didn't choose to be here, Riker. You were brought here by fate, and I'm glad you're here. You've given my people a chance to survive. He looked at her, a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I never thought I'd be training alien soldiers. But I guess we all find our place in the universe somehow. For a moment, there was silence between them, the weight of their shared experiences hanging in the air. Thalira could see the weariness in his eyes, the ghosts of his past still haunting him. But she also saw something else, something stronger than the sorrow he carried, hope. She had brought that hope back into his life, just as he had done for her when she was a child. You've changed me, Riker said quietly, breaking the silence. I didn't know I was capable of feeling anything again, but being here with you, it feels different. It feels right. Thalira's heart fluttered at his words. She had always felt a connection to him, even when she was a child. But now, as an adult, it was clearer than ever. There was something between them, a bond forged by destiny and strengthened by their shared struggles. They were more than just a princess and a warrior. They were two souls who had found each other in the vastness of space. "I'm glad you're here too," Thalira said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that with you by my side, we can face anything." The next few days brought even more challenges. The Vraxans were approaching, and their fleet was massive. The Zyxarians had never faced an enemy of this scale, and the battle ahead seemed impossible. But Thalira was not one to give up. She had faced too many challenges in her life to let fear hold her back. On the day of the battle, the Zyxarian fleet prepared to engage the Vraxan forces. Thalira stood on the bridge of the flagship, her gaze focused on the approaching enemy. She was calm, her heart steady, but inside she felt the weight of the responsibility she carried. The fate of her people rested in her hands. Riker stood beside her, his presence reassuring. "We've trained for this," he said quietly. "You're ready, your people are ready." Thalira nodded, her eyes narrowing as the Vraxan ships loomed closer. "I won't let them take my home." The battle began with a deafening roar. The Zyxarian fleet launched into action, their ships maneuvering with precision as they engaged the Vraxan forces. The sound of blaster fire and explosions filled the air as the two sides clashed in a violent storm of steel and fire. Thalira watched from the command center, her heart pounding in her chest. She had seen war before, but this was different. The stakes were higher. Her people's survival depended on the outcome of this battle. She could not afford to lose. Through the chaos, she saw Riker, commanding a group of Zyxarian fighters, moving with purpose and skill. He was a warrior, and he fought like one. His presence on the battlefield was a beacon of hope, guiding the Zyxarians as they held their ground against the Vraxans. "Stay focused," Riker's voice came through her communicator. "We've got this, just stay the course." Thalira felt a surge of confidence. Riker's words reminded her of something she had learned in her youth. No matter how overwhelming the odds, there was always a chance for victory if you had the will to fight. The battle raged on for hours, with both sides suffering heavy losses. The Vraxans, relentless in their pursuit of conquest, pressed hard, but the Zyxarians fought back with all their might. Thalira coordinated the movements of her fleet, using the tactics Riker had taught them. Together they fought not just for survival, but for the future of their world. Finally, as the Vraxan fleet began to retreat, Thalira stood victorious. The Zyxarians had held their ground, and the enemy was forced to withdraw. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. Many lives had been lost, and the scars of war would remain for years to come. Thalira looked out at the stars, her heart heavy with the weight of the victory. She had saved her people, but at what cost? The war was not over, and there was still much to be done. But in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. With Riker by her side, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead together. They had found each other in the vastness of space, and together they would fight for the future of Zyxar, for their people, and for the bond that had brought them together. The aftermath of the battle left Zyxar's skies streaked with the light of distant explosions, the echoes of war lingering in the air. The Zyxarian fleet had emerged victorious, but it was clear that the war was far from over. The Vraxan Legion had been pushed back for now, but their retreat was a sign that they would return, stronger and more determined than before. Thalira stood on the command deck of the royal flagship, staring out into the black void of space, the weight of her responsibilities pressing heavily on her shoulders. The princess had always known that leadership came with sacrifice, but the costs of this victory were personal. The losses had been immense, and the faces of the fallen soldiers haunted her thoughts. She had led her people to safety, but there was still so much to do. The Vraxans would be back, and when they did, Zyxar would need to be ready. Riker stood beside her, his presence a comfort amidst the tension. He had proven to be an invaluable ally, not just as a warrior, but as a leader. His expertise and calm demeanor had helped guide them through the chaos of the battle. And now, as Zyxar's future hung in the balance, Thalira knew that their bond had grown into something deeper than mere partnership. "You did it," Riker said quietly, his voice steady but filled with pride. "You led them to victory." Thalira sighed, her eyes still fixed on the stars. "We did it, but it's not over yet. The Vraxans will return, they always do." "You're ready for them," Riker replied. "You're stronger than you think." Thalira glanced at him, her gaze softening. I didn't feel strong when we first met, but with you I've learned so much. I couldn't have done this without you." Riker smiled, a rare expression of warmth crossing his face. "You've got your own strength, you just needed someone to remind you of it." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the weight of their shared journey hung in the air. The bond between them had evolved from a simple act of gratitude to something far deeper. They had fought side by side, survived the horrors of war, and discovered in each other a strength they had both thought lost. In Riker, Thalira had found not just a warrior, but a companion. And in her, Riker had found a purpose beyond the endless struggle of survival. As they stood there, a sudden beep from the ship's console broke the moment. Thalira turned her attention to the screen, where the face of Commander Zerk appeared. "Princess, we've intercepted another transmission from the Vraxan fleet," Zerk reported, his expression grim. "They're regrouping and heading toward a nearby system. We believe they're planning to strike again, but this time with reinforcements." Thalira's heart sank. The Vraxans had learned from their defeat, and this time they would come with everything they had. Zyxar was not prepared for another assault so soon, and yet there was no choice. The battle lines had already been drawn. "We'll need to rally the allies we've made," Thalira said, her voice firm. "We cannot face them alone again." Riker nodded. "It's not just about strength. It's about unity. If we can't convince others to stand with us, we'll fall." Thalira turned back to Zerk. "Prepare the fleet. We'll need to move quickly. Contact the nearby systems and call for reinforcements. This time we make sure they don't get away." The days that followed were filled with strategizing, planning, and alliances. Thalira sent ambassadors to neighboring planets, seeking help from any who would stand against the Vraxans. The Zyxarian fleet, battered but not broken, began to prepare for the final confrontation. But there was something different in the air this time, a sense of urgency, a feeling that the stakes were higher than ever before. Thalira and Riker worked tirelessly together, finalizing the battle's strategies and ensuring that every soldier was prepared. Thalira had seen her people fight valiantly, but this time she knew they would need to be more than just warriors. They would need to be a united force, fighting not only for their survival but for the future of their planet. As the final days before the battle wore on, Thalira and Riker spent more time together, sharing their hopes and fears in quiet moments between the preparations. The once guarded distance between them had faded. There was no need for words anymore. They understood each other in ways that went beyond the surface. They had both lost so much, but in each other they had found something worth fighting for. One evening, as the final battle loomed closer, Thalira and Riker stood at the edge of a cliff on Zyxar, overlooking the vast expanse of the planet below. The winds whipped around them, but it was a calm that Thalira had never known before. For the first time in a long while, she felt at peace, knowing that whatever came next, she would not face it alone. "I never thought I'd find a place where I belonged," Riker said, his voice quiet against the wind. "I thought Earth was the only place that could ever feel like home, but now I'm not sure anymore." Thalira glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "Home isn't just a place," she said softly. "It's the people you fight for, the ones who stand by your side." Riker turned to her, his eyes meeting hers. "And I'll stand by you, Thalira, no matter what happens next." Thalira smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "You've already done more than I could ever ask for, and I'll stand by you too, together." As the days turned into hours, the final preparations were made. The Zyxarian fleet, now bolstered by allies from across the galaxy, was ready. Thalira stood on the bridge of her ship, her fingers resting lightly on the controls as the fleet gathered around her. She could feel the weight of the moment. The Vraxan Legion was coming, and this time it would be their last chance to defeat them. The enemy fleet emerged from the shadows of a nearby moon, massive and imposing. The Vraxans had arrived in full force, and the scale of the battle was unlike anything Thalira had ever seen. The Zyxarian fleet stood ready, but there was no turning back now. The time for diplomacy had passed. This was a fight for their survival. The battle began with an explosion of light and sound, as the Zyxarian and Vraxan ships collided in the cold expanse of space. Thalira's ship moved swiftly, dodging enemy fire as she coordinated the movements of her fleet. The battle was fierce, with explosions lighting up the darkness like stars falling from the sky. Through the chaos, Thalira remained focused. She directed her fleet with precision, using every tactic Riker had taught her. Her voice rang out over the communications, issuing commands and guiding her people to victory. The Zyxarian warriors fought with everything they had, their ships moving in perfect synchronization as they pushed back the Vraxan forces. Riker, leading a group of fighters, was a whirlwind of action, his ship darting through enemy lines, taking down Vraxan ships with deadly accuracy. Thalira watched him with pride, knowing that this battle was as much his as it was hers. He had become a part of her world, a protector and a friend. The battle raged on, and though the Zyxarians were holding their ground, it was clear that the Vraxans were not giving up easily. But Thalira refused to back down. She couldn't afford to. Not for herself, and not for the people who had placed their trust in her. Then, as the tide of the battle shifted, a Vraxan flagship appeared, a massive ship that dwarfed everything in its path. Thalira's heart skipped a beat as she realized that this was the Vraxan leader's vessel. It was time for the final confrontation. Thalira gave the order, and her fleet shifted into formation. The Vraxans had sent their best, but so had Zyxar. This would be the fight that determined their future. As the two flagship ships faced off, Thalira's mind raced. This battle would end one way or another, and she knew that if she could defeat the Vraxan leader, it would be the blow that would send the enemy retreating for good. The stakes were higher than ever, but Thalira had learned something over the past weeks. No matter how high the stakes, she would always fight for what mattered most. And with Riker by her side, she knew they had a chance.